Welcome to Reformed Thinking. I want you to picture something in your mind right now. Just try to put yourself in a very specific historical setting for a second.
Oh, setting the scene. I like it.
Yeah, I want you to imagine the week following the very first Christmas. Because, we get so used to the grand narrative. We think about the shining star, the angelic choirs, all of that.
The big production.
Right. And we kind of forget what happened after the curtain closed. So picture this. The skies over the fields of Bethlehem are, well, they're entirely quiet again.
Just normal skies.
Yeah, the blinding light of the angels has faded back into standard cold starlight. And the shepherds, who, they came running in an absolute panic of joy and adrenaline, they've gone back to their flocks.
Back to the daily grind.
Right, back to work. So the mud on the ground, the pungent animal smells, the biting night air, that is all that is left. And sitting right there in the middle of it is a young, completely exhausted couple.
Probably terrified, too.
Oh, absolutely. Mary is recovering from the physical trauma of labor. And keep in mind, she has zero modern medical comforts. And they were just left holding a newborn baby, staring down the staggering reality of raising God in the flesh.
Which is just a massive thought.
It is. And, in modern society, as soon as December 26th hits, what do? We start packing up the nativity scene.
Yeah, right into the attic.
We put the ceramic sheep, the wise men, the little wooden manger into a cardboard box and slide it into the basement until next year. It's neat, it's tidy, it's manageable.
But Mary and Joseph couldn't pack this away.
No, they couldn't. They had to wake up the next morning and the morning after that and live in the continuous daily reality of the incarnation.
The literal, physical reality of it.
Yeah. And so, today on our deep dive, we are pulling from the pastoral commentary by R. Kent Hughes on the Gospel of Luke. Specifically, we're looking at chapter 2, verses 21 through 52.
Which is a fantastic section of text.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to look closely at these post-Christmas events. We're going to talk about the circumcision of the child, the purification of the mother, the presentation in the temple, and a later trip to Jerusalem when the boy is 12 years old.
A lot of ground to cover.
For sure. We want to uncover how Christ completely identified with humanity and what specific posture you and I have to adopt to actually receive him.
Because reading the text this way strips away all of that cozy hot cocoa holiday sentimentality.
Oh, totally. It replaces it with this gritty, heroic, startling reality.
And that contrast between our modern celebration and their ancient reality is just striking. We box up the incarnation. We treat it as an annual seasonal feeling, a warm glow we experience in December.
Like a mood.
Yeah, like a mood. Whereas this couple lived with the breathing, crying reality of the Savior in their living space.
Right, a baby who needs to be fed and changed.
Yeah. The commentary by R. Kent Hughes does a masterful job of pulling us out of our modern comfort zones. He forces us to look at the text as literal history.
Which we desperately need.
We do. These events in Luke chapter 2 are not just filler material until Jesus starts his public ministry at age 30.
Right. It's not a fast-forward montage.
No, they're theological pillars. They establish the very nature of his rescue mission. So the text begins by detailing the circumcision of Jesus on the 8th day.
Which sounds like a minor detail, but it's huge.
It's massive. Luke describes this in a single, concise sentence, but the theological weight is incredible. To understand this, we have to look back to Genesis chapter 17.
Right, the covenant with Abraham.
Spot on. Genesis 17 laid down a strict requirement for all males who would be part of Abraham's household. God commanded that every male child had to be circumcised on the 8th day.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. Without this act, Jesus could not have identified with his people. He possessed pure Hebrew blood through his lineage, sure, but this was the required covenantal sign.
So he had to undergo it.
He did. And what stands out here is the tangible physical reality of the incarnation. Jesus had a real physical body. He was subject to pain and bleeding.
Wow, yeah.
His shedding of blood for his people did not just happen at the end of his life on the cross. It began when he was an 8-day-old infant.
That is a staggering thought.
He is fully inserting himself into the covenant constraints of God's people. He's submitting to the law that he himself authored.
Right. He wrote the law, and now he's bleeding for it as a baby. And right there at that moment, as part of that 8th-day ritual, they officially give him the name Jesus.
Which was not a surprise to them.
No, not at all. The angel Gabriel gave this specific name to both Mary and Joseph separately, before the child was even conceived.
Yeah, they were well prepared for that.
But I want to push on this naming aspect because it is so entirely foreign to how we operate today. I mean, think about the modern approach to naming babies.
It's basically a stylistic choice now.
Yeah, you go on a website, you buy a book, you find a name that sounds cute or trendy, or maybe it honors a distant relative you like. We pick names for aesthetics.
We really do.
But this naming carries the weight of a divine decree. Gabriel visits Joseph in a dream and says, "You shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins."
A very clear mandate.
Yeah, and then Gabriel visits Mary and gives the exact same instruction. Imagine the conversations Mary and Joseph had during that first week, comparing notes. They realized God had handed them an assignment.
A literal title for the child.
But the name itself has a massive historical background, right? If you break down the linguistics of the name Jesus, it is not just a gentle, peaceful moniker. It carries a heavy, militant history.
Yes, the linguistic roots matter so much here, and they completely change how we view the infant.
How so?
Well, in our secularized age, the average person on the street has no idea what the name Jesus actually means. Jesus is the Greek rendering of the Hebrew word Joshua.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you trace that back even further, Joshua's original name was Hoshea, which translates to salvation.
Oh, right.
Numbers chapter 13 records how Moses changed the name of Hoshea, the son of Nun, to Joshua. By adding the divine name of God, it becomes Jehovah is salvation.
Wow. And Joshua, of course, became Israel's greatest military general.
Exactly. He was the one who led them across the Jordan River and directed the conquest of the Promised Land. He was a warrior.
A fierce warrior.
Yes. So the name Jesus, or Joshua, suggests deliverance by heroic, militant action from the bondage of sin. Isaiah chapter 9 calls the Messiah mighty God.
Right.
By bearing this specific name, Jesus is designated not just as a passive savior who waits for people to figure things out. He's a mighty general coming to rescue his people through direct heroic action.
He is stepping onto the battlefield of a fallen world.
He is.
That shifts the paradigm entirely. If the name Jesus signals a military-style heroic deliverance from sin, how should that alter the peaceful, silent night image we typically project onto the infant in the manger? It kind of shatters it, doesn't it?
It really does. We sing sleep in heavenly peace, but the name Joshua implies he came to wage war against sin and death.
There is a real tension there.
Yeah, it completely shatters the idea that the baby in the manger is just a symbol of universal peace and goodwill in a vague, sentimental sense.
Right, like a greeting card.
Yeah, like a Hallmark card. The name Jesus shouts to the world the heroics of the incarnation. The baby is a warrior taking on flesh to execute a rescue operation.
That's a great way to put it.
The sharp cry of the Son of God and the blood of his circumcision mark the beginning of a lifelong campaign against darkness. This is an active, aggressive salvation.
Very aggressive.
And this aggressive rescue mission leads us directly into the specific condition of the people he came to save, which becomes visibly apparent during the family's next stop.
The trip to Jerusalem.
Yeah. Let's look at what happens about a month later. Mary and Joseph have to travel to the temple in Jerusalem for the purification rites required by the law of Moses.
A very standard practice for the time. Right. But I want you to break down the mechanics of this visit, because it is not just a casual trip to church. There is a whole economic and social reality happening here.
There really is. To grasp the reality of this visit, we have to look at Leviticus chapter 12.
Okay, what does Leviticus say?
It lays out the strict regulations for a woman after childbirth. A woman who gave birth to a male child was considered ceremonially unclean for 40 days.
40 days?
Yes, and this was not about personal sin. It was about the biological realities of childbirth and the ceremonial boundaries between life and death in ancient Israel.
That makes sense.
Once those 40 days were complete, she was required to go to the temple in Jerusalem to offer sacrifices.
And what were the sacrifices?
Well, the standard purification offering required by the law was a yearling lamb for a burnt offering, plus a pigeon or a turtledove for a sin offering.
So a lamb and a bird.
Yeah, the lamb was the expectation. However, the law made a merciful provision for the impoverished. Leviticus 12, verse 8, states that if a family could not afford a lamb, they were permitted to bring 2 turtledoves or 2 pigeons instead.
Okay, so a cheaper option for the poor.
Precisely. And Luke's gospel deliberately notes that Mary and Joseph brought the birds. They bypassed the lamb entirely.
Wait, let me make sure I'm picturing this correctly. They brought the birds, which means they absolutely could not afford the lamb.
They did not have the funds.
And the temple was not a private, secluded place. It was the bustling center of Jewish life.
It was incredibly crowded.
Yeah, there were lines of people. There were wealthy families bringing their pristine, unblemished yearling lambs, handing them over to the priests with a sense of status and accomplishment.
A lot of public posturing.
Right. And then you have Mary and Joseph stepping up to the priests in the middle of this crowded courtyard, handing over 2 cheap birds. This isn't just a private moment of being broke. This is a public, undeniable declaration of absolute poverty right in the middle of the religious establishment.
It is. When they handed those birds to the priest, everyone in the temple courtyard knew their financial status.
Everyone knew.
They were destitute. They were at the bottom of the social and economic ladder. And Archant Hughes draws out a vital theological thread from this specific event.
Which is?
Christianity begins entirely with a spirit of need. It starts with spiritual destitution.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Psalm 34 tells us that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. God draws near to the bankrupt, never to the self-sufficient.
Never to the proud.
Exactly.
Yep.
This public display of poverty by the earthly parents of the Son of God is not an accident of history. It is a calculated demonstration of the posture required to approach God.
That makes so much sense.
It echoes Mary's song from the previous chapter, the Magnificat. In that song, she praises God specifically because he looked on the humble estate of his servant, while scattering the proud in the thoughts of their hearts.
So God actively seeks out the empty.
Yes, the persistent refrain of Christ's life is that God favors the empty. I mean, the angels revealed the birth to outcast shepherds working the night shift.
Not the wealthy.
Right, not to the high and mighty elites in Jerusalem. The wretched circumstances of the birth in a stable, the poor woman's offering at the temple, it all points to the same truth.
We have to come empty.
We do. We must constantly guard against the illusion of personal spiritual adequacy. Even those who have walked in faith for decades can wrongly turn spiritual maturity into a prideful self-sufficiency.
Like they've somehow earned their spot.
Yeah, a sense that they have somehow earned their standing. But our only adequacy is found in Christ, and we access it by admitting we have nothing to offer.
You know, I want to focus on that idea of self-sufficiency because it runs contrary to everything we are taught as human beings.
Oh, 100%.
Think about an analogy like applying for a bank loan or trying to get accepted into a prestigious club or even going on a job interview. In human systems, what do?
You sell yourself.
You polish your resume. You wear your best suit. You project wealth, competence, and utter self-sufficiency to gain access. You hide your flaws, you bury your debts, and you highlight your assets.
You have to look like you don't need help.
Exactly. You walk into that bank, and you try to prove that you do not actually need their money, which is the only way they will give it to you.
It's so backwards.
It is. But God's economy operates in total reverse. He requires us to walk through the door and declare absolute spiritual bankruptcy to gain access. He requires us to bring the 2 cheap birds, so to speak.
That's a great image.
So, since God's economy operates in total reverse, why do people so frequently try to clean themselves up before approaching God? Why do we instinctively try to hand God a flawless yearling lamb of our own good works?
Well, we do that because the human ego recoils at the idea of being helpless.
It hurts our pride.
Right. Admitting total bankruptcy feels like death to our pride. We want to contribute something, even if it is just a small percentage, to our own salvation.
Like chipping in for the bill.
Yeah, we want to feel that our moral choices, our charity, or our church attendance gives us some leverage or standing before the Creator.
We want to earn it.
The theological term for this is justification by works, and it is the default setting of the human heart. We want to hand God our good works to prove we belong in the temple.
But God rejects that.
He does. God says, no. Bring the poor woman's offering. Admit you have absolutely nothing of value to purchase your salvation.
Man, that takes a brutal humbling.
It strips away all our moral posturing. But this precise posture of spiritual bankruptcy and intense hunger was perfectly embodied by 2 senior citizens waiting right there in the temple courtyard.
Simeon and Anna.
Yes. While the religious elites were busy projecting their righteousness, there were 2 people who understood what it meant to be empty so that God could fill them.
Yeah, this brings us to an incredible encounter in the text. While Mary and Joseph are in the temple courtyard with their poor woman's offering, we meet Simeon and Anna.
2 amazing figures.
Let's look at their profiles because they are fascinating. Simeon is described as a man who is righteous and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel.
A very specific phrase.
Right, and the text notes that the Holy Spirit was upon him, which was rare before the day of Pentecost. He held a divine oracle from God stating he would not die before seeing the Lord's Messiah.
A direct promise from God.
And then you have Anna, a prophetess. Her backstory is staggering. She had lived with her husband for 7 years after her marriage, and then lived as a widow until she was 84.
Which means she was very old.
Yeah, depending on when she was married, which was usually in early adolescence in that culture, scholars note she was likely over 100 years old.
Just incredible longevity.
And she never left the temple.
Yeah.
She was worshiping with fasting and prayer night and day. Put yourself in that setting. First century widowhood was an incredibly vulnerable position.
There was no safety net.
No social safety net, no pension, no retirement fund. A widow without a family to support her was completely reliant on the charity of others just to survive. Yet, she spent decades in the temple courtyard, fasting and praying.
Their physical reality contrasted sharply with their spiritual vitality. You have to visualize these two individuals standing in the massive stone courtyards of Herod's temple.
It's quite a scene.
Their physical profiles were stooped. Anyone approaching would see age-spotted hands, translucent skin around veined eyes, the physical frailty of advanced age.
They were fragile.
Very fragile. They were at the end of their physical lives. But beneath that physical decay were souls that were incredibly young, vibrant, and growing.
They were spiritually alive.
They represented the absolute best of Israelite piety. They were the faithful remnant. You mentioned Simeon was waiting for the consolation of Israel.
Yeah, what does that phrase mean?
That phrase is highly specific and loaded with theological meaning. It connects directly to the Greek translation of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 1, which reads, "Comfort, comfort my people."
Okay, so they were waiting for comfort.
Yes. The Jewish people had endured 400 years of prophetic silence between the end of the Old Testament and these events.
400 years is a long time.
It is. They were under the brutal occupation of the Roman Empire, ruled locally by the paranoid and violent King Herod. Simeon and Anna were waiting for the ultimate comfort,
The Messiah.
the promised Messiah, who would break the silence and bring redemption. What stands out is that they believed and waited when almost no one else in Israel did.
Everyone else was distracted.
The religious leaders were focused on politics and power. But Simeon and Anna shared this electric, joyous expectation. They came to God's house hungry, possessing a perpetual sense of need.
It is the ultimate paradox. They were totally empty so they could be filled.
Beautifully said.
I want to contrast their posture with how we view success today. Kent Hughes references Ernest Hemingway's concept of the completest man.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
Hemingway idealized the man who needs nothing. He relies on no one, takes what he wants by his own strength, and certainly does not need God.
The ultimate self-made man.
Yeah, that rugged individualism, that total self-reliance is the cultural ideal today. We celebrate the self-made person. But Simeon and Anna flip that completely upside down.
They do?
They personify total dependency. They are flesh and blood examples of the spiritually bankrupt people to whom Christ comes.
They had nothing but their hope.
Right. I picture Simeon and Anna like someone standing by a mailbox at the end of a long, dusty driveway.
Just waiting.
Imagine someone standing by that mailbox every single day for decades, waiting for a promised letter. The weather changes, the seasons pass, the paint on the mailbox peels.
And people probably thought they were crazy.
Oh, for sure. People drive by and mock them for standing there, telling them the letter is never coming. But they never lose hope.
Such stamina.
In a modern culture obsessed with instant gratification, where we get legitimately angry if a web page takes 4 seconds to load, how can a modern person cultivate the kind of patient, desperate longing for God's grace that kept Anna in the temple fasting for 84 years?
Well, cultivating that kind of patience requires an honest, unflinching assessment of our own insufficiency.
We have to admit we need help.
Yes. If we believe we can satisfy our souls with our careers, our technology, our entertainment, or our financial portfolios, we will never wait by that mailbox.
We'll just distract ourselves.
We will just go back inside and turn on the television. Simeon and Anna stayed in the temple because they knew the world offered no real consolation.
They saw through the illusion.
They understood that the Roman Empire, the local economy, and even the religious rituals themselves could not fix the brokenness of the human condition.
None of it was enough.
So we cultivate that longing by asking God to expose our spiritual poverty. It sounds completely counterintuitive to the modern ear.
Praying to feel poor, yeah, that's weird.
But praying for a greater sense of your own spiritual need is the gateway to grace. You have to realize the well of your own self-sufficiency is entirely dry before you start thirsting for living water.
Wow.
Anna fasted and prayed because she recognized her physical hunger was just a shadow of her spiritual hunger. She leaned into her emptiness.
And after decades of that emptiness, after decades of waiting by that mailbox, one ordinary afternoon, it finally happens.
The letter arrives.
Yes. Simeon spots a poor couple walking into the courtyard carrying a baby and a pair of cheap birds. Out of all the people in Jerusalem that day, the Holy Spirit prompts this old man to approach this specific, unremarkable family.
It's such a quiet, normal-looking moment.
But his lifelong anticipation culminates in a song. Simeon takes the baby in his arms and sings a brief, beautiful hymn that the church has historically called the Nunc Dimittis.
Which comes from the Latin translation.
Right. Based on his opening words, "Now let your servant depart in peace." I want to visualize the physical scene here because it is so incredibly moving.
Paint the picture.
You have this old man with trembling, frail arms, reaching out and lifting a fat, dimpled baby from a startled young mother. And for a moment, the entire world stops turning. Simeon looks up and says to God, "For my eyes have seen your salvation."
The magnitude of Simeon's claim in that moment cannot be overstated.
It's massive.
It is. The early church actually called Simeon Theodosius, which is a Greek term that translates to God receiver.
God receiver, I love that.
When he says, "My eyes have seen your salvation," it raises a critical theological point. Simeon does not say he has seen a part of God's salvation.
Like a down payment.
Right. He does not say he has seen the beginning of a process that humanity has to finish through good works or moral effort.
He's not saying, "Here's the starter kit."
No. He holds a helpless infant and declares he has seen the whole of it. Christ is totally sufficient. The theological reality here is that salvation is Jesus Christ plus nothing.
Plus absolutely nothing.
It is completely external to Simeon. And then Simeon continues his song. He identifies this child as a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to the people of Israel.
Which is a bold thing to say there.
That is a massive, shocking statement to make right in the middle of the Jewish temple.
It really is. The temple had a literal dividing wall of hostility, separating the court of the Gentiles from the inner courts where the Jewish people worshipped.
They literally kept them out.
Yeah. The Gentiles were the vast majority of the world's population, and they were largely despised by the religious establishment of the day.
Considered unclean.
Yet here is a Jewish prophet standing in the Jewish temple, holding the Jewish Messiah, and the first group of people he mentions in his Song of Salvation are the Gentiles.
He opens the door to the whole world.
Simeon announces the universal scope of the offer. Jesus is the light in a dark world for the nations, while simultaneously being the full realization of Israel's glory.
It's a gorgeous promise.
But I want to focus on the emotional reality of Simeon in that exact moment. Picture this old man feeling the heavy weight of his years, feeling his physical decline, holding an infant.
His arms are probably shaking.
Yeah. And suddenly, he feels completely ready to die. He says, "Now let your servant depart in peace." You know, humans usually associate peace with resolved conflicts.
Like paying off a mortgage.
Right. We feel peace when we have enough money in the bank, or when we ensure our families are secure, or when a medical test comes back clear.
Circumstantial peace.
Why does holding a helpless infant provide a man with such absolute, resolute peace that he is entirely ready to face death right then and there?
Because true peace does not come from controlling your circumstances. It comes from resting your soul in the finished work of God.
Okay, unpack that.
The theological concept here is objective justification. Simeon's peace was not based on his own internal feelings. It wasn't based on his own track record of righteousness.
It wasn't about what he had done.
It was based entirely on the object he was holding. He held the Prince of Peace. He recognized that the divine rescue mission was secured in the person of this child.
The guarantee was in his arms.
Yes. If salvation depended on Simeon's own continued moral efforts, he could never die in peace.
Because he would never know if he did enough.
He would constantly worry if he'd done enough, if he had prayed enough, if he had been good enough. But because salvation was entirely bound up in the child he held, the burden was lifted off his shoulders.
The work was done.
He could depart in peace because the mighty warrior, the true Joshua, had arrived to fight the battle for him. The outcome of the war was guaranteed, so the old man could finally rest.
That is just breathtaking. But just as we are swept up in this beautiful, ecstatic song of peace, Simeon abruptly pivots.
He takes a sharp turn.
The mood in the courtyard changes instantly. He turns his focus directly to Mary, and he delivers a harsh, striking prophecy that completely shatters whatever warm sentimentality was left in the room.
It gets very heavy.
Simeon blesses them, and then looks directly at Mary and says, "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed."
A sign of opposition.
Yeah. Then he adds a chilling parenthetical warning specifically to her. He says, "And a sword will pierce through your own soul also."
Just devastating words for a mother to hear.
Finally, he concludes the prophecy by saying, "So that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed." Let's break that down piece by piece, starting with the sword piercing Mary's soul. What is the reality she is facing?
We have to remember that Mary had previously sung the Magnificat, praising God that future generations would call her blessed.
Which was true.
That was entirely true. But Simeon is revealing the excruciating sorrow that will accompany that blessing. The Greek word used for sword here is not a small dagger.
It's not a pocket knife.
No, it is a large broadsword used for heavy combat. It signifies the massive tearing agony she will endure as the mother of the Messiah.
Give me some examples of that agony.
Well, it points to the family's terrifying sudden flight to Egypt to escape Herod's murder squads who were slaughtering infants in Bethlehem.
They became refugees.
Yes. It points to the reality of watching her son grow up, only to be misunderstood, mocked, accused of having a demon, and violently rejected by his own community.
Which would break any mother's heart.
And most brutally, it points to Mary standing helpless at the foot of the cross, watching the child she nursed and raised slowly suffocate to death as a public criminal.
The ultimate pain.
The most honored woman in history would know unimaginable pain. The sword of his suffering would pierce her own soul.
Man. And then there's the rest of the prophecy, which applies to everyone else, not just Mary.
The falling and rising.
Right, he declares that the child is appointed for the fall and rising of many, and that he will be a sign that is opposed, revealing the thoughts of many hearts. How does Christ reveal the thoughts of hearts?
Christ acts as a brilliant, unyielding diagnostic tool for the human soul.
What do you mean by that?
When people truly encounter the biblical Jesus, their inner thoughts, their hidden motives, their pride, their self-righteousness, their secret sins, they are dragged out into the light.
Nowhere to hide.
Human goodness, when placed next to the blinding holiness of Christ, is exposed as filthy rags. Because humans are naturally unable or unwilling to handle that kind of exposure, they instinctively oppose him.
We fight back.
We do. The text says he is a sign that is opposed. This touches on the doctrine of total depravity.
Okay.
Apart from God's merciful intervention, the natural human default is not to seek God. It's to fight against Christ's authority because he threatens our autonomy.
We want to be in charge.
We want to be our own kings. Jesus brings a crisis wherever he goes. People must fall in humiliation before they can rise in grace.
You know, it makes me think of a harsh medical diagnostic scan.
Like an MRI.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine you go to the doctor because you have a minor ache, expecting them to just give you a pill. But they run an MRI, and the scan reveals a deadly, aggressive disease you desperately did not want to acknowledge.
A terrifying moment.
That scan hurts emotionally. It ruins your day. It shatters your illusion of health and forces you to confront your mortality.
Ignorance was bliss.
But seeing the disease clearly on the screen is the only way you will ever submit to the painful, necessary cure.
That's a perfect parallel.
So how does this concept that Jesus actively knocks us down in humiliation, exposing our spiritual disease so he can pick us up, how does that challenge the common modern perception of Jesus as just a mild moral teacher whose main goal is to boost our self-esteem?
Oh, it completely dismantles that modern caricature.
Huh.
A mild moral teacher just gives you helpful tips on how to live a slightly better, more fulfilled life.
Like a life coach.
Right. Life coach gives you strategies for success. But Simeon says Jesus brings a sword and causes people to fall.
He causes a craft.
You must bow in total humiliation and poverty of spirit before you can rise to new life. If Jesus is just a life coach, you never have to fall.
You just add him to your routine.
You never have to admit bankruptcy. You just implement his 5 steps for a better marriage or a better attitude. But the biblical Christ demands absolute surrender.
Total submission.
When we see our utter inadequacy, when our filthy rags are exposed by his perfection, only then are we ready for grace. He brings us to the end of ourselves.
He breaks us to heal us.
Yes, he does not come to improve our old nature. He comes to put it to death so he can resurrect a new one.
This revealing of hearts, this exposing of human inadequacy and His own absolute allegiance to the Father's will defined his entire time on
His
earth.
whole mission.
And we see this clearly demonstrated when Luke fast-forwards the narrative. The text jumps 12 years later. Let's look at what happens when Jesus is a 12-year-old boy.
We skip past the childhood.
Yeah, the text notes that Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem every year for the Feast of the Passover. The Hebrew Scriptures required all males aged 13 and above to attend the major feasts in Jerusalem.
A big annual event.
While it was not mandatory for women, Mary's consistent presence year after year testifies to her intense piety. Now, Jesus is 12 years old, and the family travels in a large caravan from Nazareth to Jerusalem.
A long trip.
Can you explain the logistics of that travel? Why a large caravan? What did that trip actually look like?
The logistics of travel in the first century were daunting and physically exhausting.
Not like taking a flight today.
Not at all.
Mm.
Nazareth was in the northern region of Galilee, and Jerusalem was in Judea to the south. The distance was roughly 80 miles, which typically required several days of travel on foot,
80 miles walking.
often over steep, rocky terrain. They traveled in a large extended group, gathering other pilgrims from various towns along the way, primarily for safety.
Safety in numbers.
Exactly. The most direct route from Galilee to Judea passed straight through Samaria. However, the region of Samaria was historically hostile to Jewish pilgrims due to centuries of ethnic and religious tension.
So they went around it.
To avoid conflict, these caravans would often cross the Jordan River, travel down the eastern bank through Perea, and then cross back over near Jericho.
That adds miles to the trip.
It does. And then they'd begin the long, dangerous uphill climb to Jerusalem. Traveling in massive numbers provided necessary protection from bandits who frequently ambushed travelers on these roads.
Oh, like the parable of the Good Samaritan?
Yes, very similar setting. It also created a vibrant, communal camaraderie. Imagine hundreds of people walking together, cooking together, and singing the Psalms of Ascent as they climbed the roads toward the holy city,
Preparing their hearts.
preparing their hearts for the Passover.
That paints a vivid picture of the physical toll of this life. But why is it significant that Jesus is exactly 12 years old on this particular trip? Why does Luke highlight this specific age?
This age provides crucial cultural context. In Jewish tradition, at age 13, a male officially became a son of the commandment.
A son of the commandment. Okay.
He took on the full responsibilities of an adult in the religious community, very similar to a modern bar mitzvah. He was now personally accountable for keeping the law.
So 12 is the prep year?
Exactly. The Mishnah, which records Jewish oral traditions and regulations, suggested that fathers should actively train their sons in the Passover observance 1 or 2 years prior to their coming of age.
Getting them ready.
Therefore, bringing 12-year-old Jesus was part of his formal theological training. He was brought to observe and participate in the very heart of Israel's religious life.
He's stepping up to the plate.
He's preparing to take on the full yoke of the law.
So we can draw a direct line from the infant who is passively presented in the temple, shedding blood at his circumcision without any conscious choice, to this 12-year-old boy walking into the temple courtyard under his own power.
It's a huge shift.
He's keenly aware of his unique relationship with his Father in heaven, and he is preparing for the ultimate Passover mission he would eventually fulfill on the cross. The contrast between the baby and the boy is striking.
Yes, the progression is vital to Reformed theology.
Tell me more about that progression.
Well, in the earlier verses, we saw his passive obedience. As an infant, he submitted to circumcision and the presentation in the temple. He shed blood and fulfilled the law without conscious action.
He just let it happen to him.
He allowed things to be done to him to fulfill the righteous requirements. Now, at age 12, we see the beginnings of his active obedience.
Active obedience.
Yes, he is sitting in the temple courts listening to the greatest theological teachers of Israel and asking them questions. He is actively engaging with the law.
He's participating.
He is fulfilling all righteousness perfectly
Yeah.
in his thoughts, his studies, and his actions.
The irony is astounding. You have to step back and look at the whole picture. He is sitting there as a 12-year-old student, taking notes, asking questions, and learning the very law that he himself authored as the second person of the Trinity.
It's almost funny to think about.
He gave those laws to Moses on Mount Sinai, and now he is sitting on the floor as a boy, submitting to them. Seeing Jesus actively studying and submitting to the law, how does that expand our understanding of his active obedience and his total identification with humanity?
It proves that he did not take any shortcuts in his incarnation.
He did the work.
He did not bypass the human experience of learning, growing, and submitting to authority. Luke tells us that he increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man.
He grew up like a normal kid.
He experienced the full limitations and developmental stages of human life, yet without sin. This concept of active obedience is just as necessary for our salvation as his death on the cross.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Just as necessary?
Yes. If Jesus only died for our sins, he would wipe our slate clean, but we would still have no positive record of righteousness to present to a holy God.
We'd be at zero.
Right, neutral. He lived the perfect life of obedience that we failed to live so that his flawless record, his active obedience to every demand of the law, could be credited to our account.
He earned the A+ for us. He earned the righteousness that we desperately needed.
That brings all the historical threads together beautifully. Let's summarize the core insights from our deep dive today. R. Kent Hughes shows us through his commentary that the incarnation was a gritty, real, physical rescue mission.
Not a fairy tale.
Not a neat theological concept floating in the clouds. It involved real physical pain and blood on the 8th day of circumcision.
The cries of a baby.
It involved real public poverty with the cheap turtledoves at the purification. It involved decades of literal waiting by Simeon and Anna in the courts. And it involved the real physical dust, sweat, and danger of a caravan traveling from Nazareth to Jerusalem.
And the central theological pillar standing amidst all that historical reality is that Jesus is salvation plus nothing.
Plus nothing.
Accessing this grace operates on an entirely different economy than the world's systems. It requires the absolute spiritual bankruptcy of the poor woman's offering.
It requires the patient, desperate hunger of Simeon and Anna. You cannot bring your own merits, your own resume, or your own self-sufficiency to this transaction.
It won't work.
You have to come empty.
So let's turn this directly to you, the listener. Consider your own posture before God right now. Think about your daily life. When you pray, when you attend church, when you think about your standing before a holy God, how are you approaching him?
It's the most critical question.
Are you walking in with a polished resume of your good deeds, your theological knowledge, your moral superiority over your neighbors?
Holding up your spotless lamb.
Are you carrying a pristine yearling lamb of your own making, trying to prove you belong? Or are you approaching with empty hands, like Mary and Joseph holding those cheap birds, declaring your absolute desperate need for a savior?
We have to constantly guard against prideful self-sufficiency. If you think you are doing pretty well on your own, if you think you just need a little advice from a mild moral teacher, you will never see the beauty of the Nunc Dimittis.
You'll miss the peace.
You will never know the absolute rock-solid peace Simeon felt when he held that baby. That specific peace is reserved only for those who know they are completely ruined without Christ.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to consider long after this deep dive ends. When the holiday season inevitably concludes and we pack away our nativity sets, what are we really doing?
That's a convicting thought.
Are we safely boxing Jesus up as a quiet, harmless piece of history to be stored in the attic? Or are we preparing ourselves for the massive broadsword Simeon promised, the sword that ruthlessly exposes our hidden inner thoughts and demands our complete, unyielding allegiance every single day of the year?
That is the defining question. The true Christ will not be managed, and he certainly will not stay in the box.
Keep examining the text closely, keep looking for the truth, and thank you for listening.